Steph, Caregivers Chronicles Unveiled, the critical care unit for caregivers. Real conversations, real care, real healing. Doc Steph, I see your hands holding the weight of 100 plans. Soft in the dark, strong in the light. You make it feel a little more right. Take a breath.
Hey, everyone. Caregiving teaches us that grief is not limited to death. Sometimes we grieve changes, dreams, expectations, abilities, relationships, and seasons of life that unfolded differently than we imagined. Grief is not always about saying goodbye to someone we love. Sometimes it is learning to say goodbye to the life we thought we would have or live. And sometimes it is both. So, how do we faithfully live the life we have instead of the life we imagine? Welcome to Caregivers Chronicle Unveiled. We are on episode 12, Grieving the Unexpected. And this is the wrap up of season 1 of Caregiver Chronicles. I am your host, Doc Steph, and grief is often associated with death. Yet, caregiving teaches us that grief can begin long before we ever say goodbye. As caregivers, we experience many kinds of loss throughout the journey. Sometimes those losses happen gradually, almost unnoticed, until one day we realize that life looks very different, from what we once imagined. We may find ourselves grieving changes we never expected while still carrying the responsibility of caring for another person. The difficult part is that many of these losses are invisible. There is no celebration of life, no gathering of family and friends, no public acknowledgement that something meaningful has changed. Sometimes we look at the then and the now and find it hard to believe how much has changed. We remember who they were, who we were, and the life we thought we would be living. Yet the grief is just as real because we are mourning something that mattered deeply to us. So, yes, your loss may not be death, but some losses we do grieve, and it has nothing to do with death. So, recognizing those losses is not a sign of weakness or lack of gratitude. It is an honest response to loving deeply while living through unexpected change. So, today we're going to talk about what it means to grieve the unexpected and how we faithfully live the life we have when it looks different from the life we imagine. When we hear the word grief, most of us immediately think about death. Yet, caregiving teaches us that often begins long before we ever say goodbye. It quietly enters our lives through unexpected changes, often before we realize we are grieving at all. Sometimes we grieve watching someone we love slowly lose pieces of themselves. Other times we grieve the loss of independence, the changes in a relationship, or the realization that life is no longer unfolding the way we once imagined. We may even find ourselves grieving parts of our own lives, the plans we postpone, the opportunities we miss, or the person we were before caregiving became part of our story. These experiences may look different from one caregiver to another, but they all have one thing in common. They involve loss. And every loss, whether it is visible to others or known only to us, deserves to be acknowledged. Acknowledging grief means we are being honest about what has changed. And honesty is often where healing begins. Sometimes we become so focused on caring for someone else that we never stop long enough to recognize what we have lost ourselves. Even when we do recognize it, we have a way of talking ourselves out of our own grief. We tell ourselves, I should be grateful they are still here, or other people have it worse than I do. Sometimes we believe that acknowledging our grief somehow diminishes our love for the person we're caring for. So we push our feelings aside and keep going. The truth is, grief does not disappear simply because we ignore it. It often finds other ways to make itself known. It can surface as irritability, emotional exhaustion, guilt, sadness, or a heaviness we cannot quite explain. Permitting ourselves to grieve is not permitting ourselves to quit. It is acknowledging that something meaningful has changed. Healing often begins the moment we stop minimizing our loss and honestly recognize what has been weighing on our hearts. Grief is not something we overcome by pretending it no longer exists. It becomes part of our story, but it does not have to become the whole story. Gradually, we come to realize that grief and gratitude can coexist. Here's something else that can coexist. We can miss who someone used to be while still cherishing the moments we have today. We can grieve the life we imagine while learning to appreciate the life that still unfolds before us. We can acknowledge what has been lost without losing sight of what remains. That does not happen overnight. It is a journey of learning to hold two realities at once. We honor what has changed without allowing those changes to rob us of the ability to experience joy, hope, or purpose in the present. Living faithfully is not about pretending life turned out exactly as we planned. It is about embracing the life before us with the same faith, courage, and hope that have carried us through every unexpected turn along the way. So, life has a way of unfolding differently than we expect. Caregiving reminds us that every day, somewhere along the journey, we begin to understand that faithfulness is revealed in how we continue to live, love, and serve in the life we have been given. Every season offers opportunities to trust God, to care for others, and to continue becoming the person He is shaping us to be. The life before us may look different from the one we imagine, but it is still a life with purpose. There are still relationships to nurture, memories to make, lessons to learn, and opportunities to bless others. Grief may always have a place in our hearts, but it no longer has to look determine what tomorrow looks like. Looking back helps us understand where we have been. Looking ahead reminds us that there are still chapters waiting to be written. We carry yesterday with us, but with we are also, forgive me, entrusted with today. That is where hope begins. Not because everything turned out the way we wanted, but because every new day gives us an opportunity to live the life we have faithfully. So, for me, as I look back on my caregiving journey, I realized I was grieving long before either of my parents passed away. At the time, I simply thought I was adjusting to life. It took years for me to recognize that grief had been walking beside me all along. I grieved the life I no longer had as as a living caregiver. My independence changed. My decisions revolved around someone else's needs, and even the work I accepted had to fit around my responsibilities at home. I grieved watching my mother gradually become more fragile. Each change reminded me that I was slowly saying goodbye to the woman I had always known, even though she was still with me. When my father died, I was a young adult and grieved his loss deeply. After my mother passed away, more recently, I discovered something I was not expecting. My heart was at peace. At first, I wondered if something was wrong with me. Should I have felt differently? Should I have been overwhelmed with sadness? I actually felt guilty because I was at peace. I did not want anyone to know. As I continued healing, I came to understand where that peace came from. Throughout those years of caregiving for my mom, I had done everything within my ability to give my mother the best quality of life I could. I loved her, cared for her, advocated for her, and remained by her side until the very end. That is why I can honestly say it is well with my soul. My peace did not come from the fact that she had died. My peace came from knowing that I had been faithful throughout the journey. I no longer had to watch her suffer, and I carried no regrets about how I cared for her. Looking back now, I realized my grief was never limited to death. I was grieving throughout the caregiving journey. I was grieving the changes in my parents, the changes in my own life, and the unexpected path my life has taken. Understanding that helped me extend grace to myself and recognize that grief has been part of my journey all along. So I want to encourage you throughout today's conversation. We have seen that grief is a natural part of the caregiving journey. Scripture reminds us that grief does not have the final word. God meets us in our grief, strengthens us through it, and gives us peace as we faithfully continue the journey before us. You know, Lamentations chapter 3, 21 through 26 reminds us that hope is renewed when we remember God's faithfulness even in seasons of sorrow. His steadfast love remains, and his mercies are new every morning. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 16 through 18 reminds us that while life around us may continue to change, God is continually renewing us within. The outward journey may be marked by loss, but his transforming work marks the inward journey. Philippians chapter 4, verse 7 reminds us that God's peace, yes, has the power to guard our hearts and our minds. That peace does not erase grief, it steadies us as we walk through it one day at a time. Another passage that has encouraged me is 2 Corinthians chapter 1 verses 3 to 4. And this is where Paul describes God as the father of compassion and the God of all comfort. I find it interesting that God does not simply remove our troubles, he meets us in them. His comfort becomes part of our own journey, and over time he uses our experiences to strengthen and encourage others who are walking through similar seasons. So grief is something to acknowledge, to walk through, and to entrust to God. As we do, he gently continues his work within us. We discover that grief and hope can exist together. The losses we experience are real and they leave their mark on our lives. Yet, through God's compassion, those losses do not have the final word. Our experiences become a source of compassion, understanding, and comfort for those who are walking in a similar path. As caregivers, we may not understand every season we walk through, but we never walk through them alone. God remains present in our sorrow, faithful in our struggles, and near to us as we faithfully live the life he has entrusted to our care. So, as we close today's conversation, I want to leave you with one final thought. Life does not always unfold the way we expect. Caregiving certainly did not unfold the way many of us imagine. Along the journey, we have experienced joy and sorrow, hope and disappointment, laughter and tears. Each season has become part of our story. Looking back does not change the past, but it often helps us understand it. We begin to recognize the ways God has sustained us, strengthened us, and gently carried us through seasons we once thought we could never survive. As you continue your journey, I encourage you to permit yourself to remember, grieve, heal, and live each day that God places before you. Every season has value. Every experience has shaped you. Every step has become part of the person you are today. So thank you for joining me throughout this first season of Caregiver Chronicles Unveiled. It has been my prayer that these conversations have reminded you that your caregiver journey matters, your experiences have value, and your life continues to have purpose. Until next season, may God's peace guard your heart, His strength sustain you each day, and His presence remind you that you never walk this journey alone. Peace and blessings.
Dark stuff. Real conversations, real care, real healing.